Good morning and welcome to Little by Little, a short time in God's Word. Today, April 19th, we're picking it up in 1 Samuel chapter 30. This is an interesting chapter because as we've been going through Samuel, we've seen David kind of take off by himself, and then eventually all these guys come around, and he kind of has this standing army, right? And things are good. But the background of all these guys, let's remember that. Those in debt, those disheartened, right? Kind of those on the edge of society are those that have joined David. So keep that in mind as we read about what happens when things don't go their way. 1 Samuel chapter 30. Now when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, the Amalekites had made a raid against the Negeb and against Ziklag. They had overcome Ziklag, they burned it with fire, and they taken captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great. They killed no one, but carried them off and went their way. When David and his men came to the city, they found it burned with fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. And then David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. Okay, hey, seriously. David's two wives also have been taken captive. And then verse 6. And David was greatly distressed. You're like, why? Because his wives are taken, his families are taken? Well, that's part of it, and that's what we saw in verse 2, is that everyone's taken. And then verse 4, the people and all with them raised their voices and they're crying until they had no more strength, right? And then verse 6, David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. So they kind of came together, they realized everyone's gone, and they're freaking out, and they're crying and emotional and all that. And then they look around at whose fault it is. Because you got to have someone to blame. And so they look to David. And so it says he's greatly distressed because the people are talking about stoning him. And then that's namely all the men that are left, right? But here's what David does, and it's why David's called a man after God's own heart. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. What did it look like? We're not told. Is it one of the Psalms that he's going to write? Is it him reading and playing to himself Psalms that he's written already? Is it him reminding himself of the promises of God, of the times where God has been faithful to protect and to watch over him? And in all of that, whatever it might have been, right? He's strengthened in the Lord. He's not strengthened in his own might or his own ideas. He draws his strength from the Lord. There's so many things for us to learn from this. When disaster strikes, when troubles come, when trials are happening, it's great to have people with us and around us, come alongside us, and we hope to do that one for another as much as possible. But before you worry about who else is with you, turn to the Lord. Because sometimes other people are not with you. Right? And you can go off the deep end if you don't turn your heart and focus on the Lord and strengthen yourself in the Lord. Spend some time reading God's Word. Spend some time in prayer and in worship. Take a walk. Whatever it is necessary or needful for you to reconnect your heart and your mind and your soul with the Lord your God. And what you'll find is not necessarily that the situation's all gone. Like here, David's going to ask and pray and inquire of the Lord, what should I do? Should I overtake them? He said, yep, go for it. And so he does, right? But before all that, you have to know that God is with you. You have to not be full of despair anymore, but take your despair and turn it into hope and trust and ask God for what's next. Till next time, keep growing little by little.